want to thank you so much for joining us today and welcome you into Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the father-son team and the financial advisors behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find out more about Ralph, about Tim, the entire team over there on the website. That is welcomehomefp.com. You can also give a call, 804-635-3550. 3 offices right here in the Richmond location, but that number will get you where you need to be. Again, 804-635-3550. It all begins with that complimentary conversation, beginning that retirement roadmap process, whether it is a second opinion or a first opinion. But the show always begins with me checking in. Gentlemen, good to see you again. How you doing today?
Doing great. How are you? Good.
Doing well. Thank you. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to spend with the listeners here. We talked about it last week. New Year. It is still 2026. Obviously, we're not wishing Happy New Year. I'm not going to check in on your resolutions. It's fine. Whatever happens,
I was
happens.
ready.
You were ready, but no, I believe as long as I don't ask, you guys are still doing great. So let's go ahead and dive into the show here. There are 2 financial vehicles that we talk about at length because there's definitely some pros and cons. We're talking, of course, about target date funds and annuities. Starting later on this year, Vanguard is introducing a new target date fund that has an annuity option. So not either or, but a yes and. What do you think? Is this a bad marriage, or do you see it having some possibilities?
Well, it's funny because there's so many different money managers and institutions that have always talked bad about annuities. And it's nice to see that they're kind of breaking ground as far as, maybe throttling back a little bit, because the annuity word is the A word and a lot of people don't want to hear it or talk
4
about
letters,
it. Right?
Yeah.
But once again, there's nothing that is a perfect science, right? Sometimes it'll work for some folks, sometimes it won't work for others. But I think one of the biggest appeals to it is for the guaranteed income. And, you don't necessarily want to set anything and forget it. But when it takes a look at, the target date plus the annuity option in there, you've got the ability to have some guarantees, whereas before there's not the guarantees, right? And I think a lot of people, as you're approaching the retirement phase, is we need to mix in a little bit more guarantees than what you've been accustomed to. Now, am I going to tell you that annuity will outpace a 30% gain in a year? Potentially not, right? But that's not what you should be looking for, or that shouldn't be what you're trying to achieve once you're in retirement. Not with all of your money, right? So it's nice to see that there's a lot of companies out there that are kind of breaking the mold and trying to get in, have a little bit more diversification there. So, but I think guarantees is a really good place. It gives people peace of mind, whether you're retired or not retired, approaching retirement, that type of thing. But one of the issues that people have always talked about with like annuities is the fact that maybe there's a little flexibility that's gone for a little bit of time. So there's going to be a trade-off. And I think what you have to do is weigh what you're actually trying to achieve with your money, what your actual retirement plan looks like, or what it needs to be, right? Because there's needs and wants, and we would all like to have our wants be our needs. But
Sure.
The fact of life is that there are some things that we want that maybe we might not be able to achieve. So, but I think it's nice to make sure that we've got some guarantees there. You just have to know the ins and the outs of any type of strategy.
So what I would say to most people when they come in and they start talking about where to put your money and things like that is to let them know one thing. There is no one perfect investment.
Right.
It depends on what you're trying to do and how we as fiduciaries make recommendations based on what you're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, even we're talking about annuities being put into these type of programs now where all these big box people are saying that we would never sell you an annuity, and all of a sudden now they're starting to do that. But at the same time, there's a big controversy about using hedge funds within your 401k. Is that a good thing? Well, if you want growth, it probably is, but you need to understand the risk. So whether it's annuities, whether it's hedge funds, you need to understand there is no perfect investment. What is it you're trying to do? Should part of it be in this, part of it in this? It depends on what you're trying to do. And people laugh when I say this, but it depends. That's the answer to just about everything that we talk about. It depends on what you're trying to do. And until we understand that, it's not in your best interest for us to tell you anything until we know what you're trying to do. But I think most people need to understand they need to know what they're trying to do.
Right.
I mean, it's great to say, I want to retire. All right. How much money do you think you're going to need on a monthly income? How much money is it going to take to do that, to make sure that you're going to have that successful retirement that you've always dreamed of? But it depends on you and what you're trying to do. I dare say, Chris, at your youthful age, that you probably have a different perspective on what you're trying to do than I do, because I'm just a couple of years older than you are.
Like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just understand that our philosophy on life is probably a little different. Mm-hmm. We've had different experiences, and all of our clients are the same way. There's not 2 clients that have the same aspirations, same way that they've gotten to where they are. And that's the biggest thing that they need to understand. What is it that you're trying to do? That helps us guide you, because that's what we're supposed to be here for, is help guide you where you want to be.
Yeah, and the reason why you say it depends so much is because everybody's in a different situation, right? Everybody's got different wants, different needs, different thoughts, different strategies, different whatever.
Right.
And this isn't boilerplate. So, if you come into the office, you're not going to receive the exact same advice as the person who comes in behind you. And that's why I think, we do laugh a little bit when you say it depends, but it's true. I mean, it will depend on your situation. Especially here in Richmond area, there's a lot of people that have worked side by side for so long, and they try to mirror each other. Well, fact of the life is that your coworker might not have ever been married and might not have ever had kids, and you've got 6 kids and 3 marriages. Well, guess what? I can assure you
it's going to look a little different.
It's going to look a little bit different. So that's why, it does depend, but you don't want to be in the same exact thing as somebody else. You need to have it tailored to you, and that's what we do.
Let's talk really quick about what that first appointment looks like when people come in to sit down and speak with you guys. How much time does it usually take?
Yeah, so it's generally less than an hour, right? Okay. It just depends on the conversation, but we're very inquisitive. I mean, our job is to know as much as we can about you to give you the best advice possible, right? Mm-hmm. So we kind of work through a couple worksheets. I know one was referred to as a test before, but it's not as daunting as it sounds, but it kind of opens up your mind. I mean, I think everybody that leaves the office after the first meeting, they're like, wow, I didn't think of it this way, right? Because you just get so consumed in what you're currently doing and the lack of changes that you're making because you've been complacent or comfortable or whatever you want to call it. It is very, very good, thoughtful meeting. We want to make sure that we address any questions potentially, but I can also tell you is that most people come in and say, okay, here's my statements. How do I look? Right. And it almost reminds you of being a doctor of like, okay, doc, how does this work? Yeah. What do I look like? And it doesn't work that way, right? Obviously, we'll take a look and we can address questions, but there's some things that we can't answer. And we tell them that. It's like, hey, we've got to get through our process and take a look at building this roadmap before we take a look at any type of recommendations. But I can tell you there's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot of things well, but there's a lot of things that are often overlooked. And I think, with that first meeting, it kind of peels back the onion a little bit because most people have not thought about long-term care. And I can assure you, a lot of people haven't thought about taxes.
Right.
But I would also say you're not going to get the same type of information from a robo-advisor or for somebody on the phone at a big box store. They can talk to you about maybe the investments or calculate this and calculate that, but they don't understand what you're trying to do. And that's why our program is just so personalized, individualized, based on what you're trying to do. And like we say, it depends on what you're trying to do, period. That robo-advisor, that chat GPT or whatever you want to do is just going to spit out something from a formula.
Right.
Not about what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's important to point out because a lot of people rely on AI nowadays, and it's only as good as what you give it, right? So, like if you ask me a question, I'm going to say, hey, well, here's the answer, but have you thought about it this way? Well, guess what? ChatGPT is not going to do. If you ask it a question, it's going to tell you the answer that you're looking for based off of how you directed the question.
It'll tell you glue's a good topping on pizza. That's happened before. But yeah, it really does depend on what you ask it. And you may manipulate it in a way where you're asking it to get the answer that you want to hear. We say that so often, as fiduciaries. You guys will tell them what they need to hear and let them know. One thing I want to zero back on with those first meetings, listeners, I want you to notice that what you do not get is a plan at the end of it. It's not here's a 1 hour thing and now this is the answer. This is what you do, because that would mean that they had some sort of cookie cutter approach in mind beforehand. It's not a cookie cutter retirement. It shouldn't be a cookie cutter retirement. And if it could all be solved in an hour, I don't know. That definitely needs a little bit more detail, a little more hands-on, but it is complimentary. It is a conversation. And if it gets you thinking about concepts that you hadn't thought about before and really improves your outlook on retirement, it's some invaluable time, honestly, but it begins with that phone call, 804-635-3550. Going online, welcomehomefp.com. In the same way that you have different projects that you do around the house. You're going to utilize different tools, different vehicles. You're not going to use a hammer for every single project. Probably not any electrical work, right?
Hope not.
Yeah, I hope not. I probably shouldn't be doing electrical work to begin with. But same sort of thing when it comes to retirement. There are different tools and different vehicles and strategies out there. And depending on what you want to achieve, really depends on which things will best suit you. Maybe it is an annuity. Maybe it is, so some market options. Maybe it is neither. Maybe it is. It just really, it does depend. We're going to say that a lot through the history of the show if you're just tuning in for the first time, because your retirement is dynamic and individual, and so the plan should be as well. But continuing that conversation, go to the website, 804-635-3550. Ryan Beck is a comedian and a filmmaker who draws from experiences with his parents who happen to be retired.
If you don't have retired parents, basically what that means is that now I call them up on the phone and they've been answering the phone as a team. I don't know why that started, but they're just like, the phone's ringing? Well, we better both hop on this. Who knows who's calling? Just hello, you're on speaker. Why? Why am I on speaker? Every time I call them, I'm on speaker. I'm like, Dad, why am I on speaker? He's like, anything you can say to me, you can say in front of your mother. Is she your attorney? Why is counsel present? What's happening?
As couples move into retirement and start doing everything together as a team, what kind of conversations do they absolutely need to have together? Maybe not on speakerphone, but, be in sync with the conversations.
Well, I think this was pretty funny. So I think we see this quite a bit is there's a CFO in the family, right? Most of the time, one spouse doesn't know what really is going on, which could cause some issues. So I think one of the biggest questions that you need to take a look at is, hey, if this is the case, and let's say the wife is the CFO and the husband has just made the money or whatever, right? We need to focus in on how much money do we have, right? Where is the money, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't know what the investment strategies look like. And we've met with so many people to where one of the biggest reasons why they come in is because if that spouse who was the CFO is no longer there, then the surviving spouse knows who to talk to, right? So I think that's very important to point out, because money is very personal. And I can tell you is that it doesn't matter if a spouse passes or don't pass, you're still going to need money, right?
Right.
So I think that's a very important conversation to have. But I think it's quite funny that, he points out it this way is, now everything's being done as a team, whereas before it wasn't, right? So I think it's more important to maybe before we get to retirement, start focusing on being a team and not just relying on one person in the relationship to handle things, because what you don't want to do is put yourself in that position to where there's an unexpected death and now you're scrambling trying to figure out where's the money, where are these checks coming from, where's my next income check going to come from?
And I would say, that brings to mind of a client that started coming to us before COVID hit years ago. And he had about $3.5 million. And, he's done his own thing. He had brought in his spreadsheet since 1969.
Engineer?
Yes, he was an engineer.
Had a hunch.
So we were talking, and he didn't want to come back in after COVID hit. He just said, I'm just stopping everything until I figure this whole thing out. So over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, he'd call us every once in a while, and we'd sit down with him. So the last time he came in, I looked at him, and he brought his statement in, and he went from 3.5 to over $7 million. And I looked at him and I said, you've done a pretty good job. Wow. Why are you here? I said, I don't know if we could do much better.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I was sitting there watching your TV program like we do every Saturday night on the TV channel. And my wife and I looked at it, and we were about to go into a nursing home and assisted living. We're trying to figure all this out. And she goes, honey, do we have enough money for us to, do all this? And he looks at her and said, dear, you've got more money than you can spend in your lifetime. And she goes, well, I'm sure of that because you've done all of it, but I have no idea what you did, nor do I have any desire to know what you did.
Okay.
So who's going to take care of this for me when you're no longer here? And he said, that's when the light bulb hit me. So that's why I'm here, because I want to make sure that somebody takes care of her if I'm not here. So those are conversations that you need to have, because one or the other is going to survive the other one.
Right. He had mentioned the spouse before, right? When you come in, that was okay. Just making sure that wasn't I happen to have I mean, that is the truth of it. In a marriage, in a partnership, there is almost inevitably a time where that does become a one-party household. And there's already that emotional toll that, the loss of your partner brings in. But if there is that uncertainty because they did have all the numbers and all the spreadsheets and things like that. I've told this story before, but I remember younger, my parents were having a party with some of their coworkers, my dad and some of the coworkers, and he made the joke, I make the money, she knows where it is. And everybody laughed, and I laughed because I was like 8 and I didn't know any better. It's funny, I guess, but that's horrifying. That's actually really horrifying because if that situation does arise and you don't know, where that money is coming from, what the passwords are, things like that. So it doesn't have to be every meeting, but we talked about the first meetings initially. When do you bring in the spouse? Ideally the first one, or is it, at every meeting?
Well, I think ideally we like to have them at every one, right? But sometimes whether it's schedules, whether it's interests, whether it's whatever, sometimes it could start as one.
Okay.
But meeting number 2, absolutely, we want to have both of them in unless they want to completely leave them out. I mean, we meet with people who are newlyweds, that maybe second marriage, maybe third marriage, whatever.
Okay.
So they just want to say, well, I've been through this before. Maybe I just need to be self-reliant, and then everything else will just be a little bit of icing on the cake, right? So, yeah, ideally we would love to have both partners, both spouses in at the same time for each meeting. But also, too, I'd like to point out, because we talked about the first meeting, complimentary, the whole process is complimentary. So even like meeting number 2, and we get that quite a bit when they come into the office and say, hey, okay, I know that this is, complimentary, but what about next time? What's that going to look like? And it's like, hey, look, you don't have to worry about it. This is just costing you some time, right? We'll go through, we'll give you some advice, we'll give you some education, and then it's left up to you because you have to sign up for it. I can't make you sign up for it. But I think also, too, to point out when it comes to spouses and beneficiaries and all that, like the events that we do around town, right? So we've got our client events, we've got a lot of fun things that we do around town, and it's a really good way for people to meet us, introduce us to their kids, their grandkids, their beneficiaries. I mean, my kids are getting older, but my kids have attended some of the of the events. My wife is usually there as well. So that's where it's, it's about family, right? We want to make sure that you feel comfortable, because we've seen it before, is where if we didn't necessarily meet a beneficiary, we'll just call it a kid, right? And the next thing you know, that person passes away. We didn't have that relationship with the beneficiary. Next thing you know, they're calling us saying, hey, Dad passed away. And there's a real life story, but we won't get into it. But Dad passed away. What do we need to do? Well, our process, come on in. We're going to talk you through things. We'll start the paperwork. We got to do a death claim, so on. Don't want to be too morbid this morning, but next thing we knew is we filed the paperwork to initiate, what needs to be done. And then they go to their current advisor. What their current advisor didn't do is let them know that all of this money was taxable.
Yeah.
And we can figure out what the rest of the story looks like. Yeah. They ended up cashing everything out. We get a phone call a year later asking why we didn't talk about taxes. And it's like, well, we didn't do anything. We filed the death certificate to let the company know that your father had passed away. So, I think that kind of comes back to the importance of these events and bringing beneficiaries, spouses, friends, that type of thing.
And I would say most people need to keep better records than what they normally do. And at that point in time, it just makes it easier for the surviving, whoever it is, to know where everything is, and they don't have to worry about, did I miss something along the way? And believe it or not, there's a lot of people that do not talk to their clients about, all right, your accounts are with such and such. Have you taken a look at who your beneficiaries are? And I can tell you more stories, more horror stories than you want to know about when people pass on or whatever, and their beneficiary was their ex-wife. The current spouse is not too happy, just so you'll know.
Probably not. If they were still alive, they'd kill them again. Yeah.
But those are actual real life situations. And I know that you're not up to the age limit where you have to worry about things like that, Chris, but there are, no matter what your age is, you need to be concerned about where your beneficiaries are. And most people, like Tim says, set it and forget it, and they don't think about it. The other thing is, a lot of people, if the beneficiary is no longer around and you haven't changed it, then it creates another problem for clients. And we always sit down and say, you got to make sure of all these things that happens. If you don't, you're going to be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, and it's also keeping it in the same place. I mean, there's another story that we can talk about at another time, but we usually, when, somebody comes on board and becomes a client, we give them a nice little portfolio to keep everything together. And in this instance, that kind of saved a child, a beneficiary, from making wrong moves. So, it's important because, these are conversations to have, because we're all going to die at some point in time, right? Death and taxes. We say it quite a bit.
So far, I think everyone has, yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's important because, hey, if it comes earlier than anticipated before we had these conversations, I've talked to my kids about what needs to be done when I'm no longer around. Now, hopefully, Chris, I'm not quite as young as you are, but, hopefully that's a long time from now, but you never know when it's going to be. And if everybody's kind of left grieving and mourning, what's the worst thing that can happen? You start making big financial decisions without knowing any type of advice or any guidance when it comes to them.
So I would say to most people here is to understand that when we sit down and do our events, such as our baseball game, such as our horse racing event, we don't talk about death and taxes. We have a good time.
Enjoy the
absolutely.
Okay. So just think that, if you want to have an enjoyable experience, hook up with us and then we'll show you what we're really like.
And I do want to point out, too, that this year's baseball game for the Flying Squirrels is going to be at the new stadium for the first series. So the Diamond's been around, I think, longer than I've been alive, as a matter of fact. So this is definitely something cool for the city.
I would have to imagine if I was at the stadium and someone came up to me and started talking to me about death and taxes, I would go the other way. But no, it is
or
a
grab another beer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I need more for this. Out of curiosity, let me give the number out really quick. It's 804-635-3550. That's how you set up a time to speak with the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, start developing that plan. Expanding on these events a little bit, have you seen over the course of working with people where you have this family here and this family here, well, they didn't know each other prior, but because of these events, suddenly they're now friends and they're doing things together? Does that happen?
Sure. Oh yeah. No, and that's what's nice is because, it's family, it's friends, and it's like, okay, hey, most people have a really good time. We introduce, we do all these good things, and the next thing you know is they'll come in for their quarterly or annual review, whatever we've got going on for them, and they're like, hey, I talked to so-and-so the other day, and we're going to go out and we're going to go down to the lake this weekend, and we're going to do, so it's really nice because now you're just kind of building this big spider web of a community, and it's nice to see. So, but yeah, I mean, if you haven't met me, I love to have a good time, right? So these events are really good, we've got some really good core events that are bigger than others, but sometimes it's just as simple as going down the Top Golf and renting a couple of bays for a few folks. So, there's a lot of really good things in there, and we're also looking for fresh ideas, but so there we are. A lot of the time we talk about something that people miss in the working world is that social aspect. And I'm not saying, come to Welcome Home Financial Partners just so that you can make friends. That is a side product, but also just getting your retirement where you want to be, getting you to, through, and beyond. 804-635-3550. Begin that complimentary conversation. And remember, all the appointments, they are all complimentary, not going to cost you anything but your time, but can be some invaluable time, I dare say, where you can go online to the website, welcomehomefp.com, click on the events tab, find out about those and register for one that suits you. Again, welcomehomefp.com. The average NBA player makes over $11 million a year. It's not too bad. But 60% of the players go broke within 5 years of retiring. Why? Well, let's check with Hall of Famer Shaquille O'Neal.
Sometimes you just get so much money and you forget. Like if you got a 5-year deal worth $100 million, you're making 20. If you spend like 20 in the first year, you'd be like, you know what? I got another 20 coming. That's how guys are thinking. I always tell them, don't think about what's going on now. Think about what has to go on in the future.
Now, I remember Shaquille O'Neal early on in his career, he was making some financial missteps, and then he got a talking to, and he's doing certainly well for himself. But, perhaps retirees aren't making $11 million a year in the work world. That'd be nice, but can the same mistakes happen to them?
Oh, absolutely. And I was trying to figure out what that music was playing on in the background. That was kind of interesting. But also, too, a little side note is, what does he not sponsor these days? I mean, I saw him on JCPenney the other day, and I'm like, I didn't even realize JCPenney was still a thing, and now he's doing the advertising. So I think it's good for him. And you're right. I mean, and I think most athletes, when you take a look at it, is they do make some financial missteps. I mean, let's face it, if you're 18 or 21 years old and now you've made it pro and you were, cream of the crop, the top of the top, and next thing you know, now you've got $10 million or $20 million coming your way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just look at the NIL deals and everything else that's going on in college sports. So, I think there's a lot of missteps there. And, I've actually had conversations with athletes before about this. And for instance, Brian Mitchell, who was back then was the Washington Redskins, but my beloved Commanders, we've talked about this in the past because he used to be part of that union, and they would try to, I guess the easiest way to say this is try to force them into dealing with a different advisor, right? So they didn't want everybody going to the same advisor because then that advisor, kind of the boilerplate thing we talked about before, but also trying to set them up with the information. And I think that's very important because a lot of and I'll call them kids, but a lot of these kids enter that workforce and they're making millions upon millions of dollars, especially in the NFL. Next thing you know, they're broke. Mm-hmm. And the NFL not lifespan, but their lifespan as far as their career is concerned, I mean, it's probably 5 to 7 years if you're lucky.
If you're really good, yeah.
And if you did a really bad job of spending in 3 years and you only did it for 5, and I don't remember what the pension thing looked like, but yeah, I mean, you can have a lot of issues. And the worst thing that you can do, put your body on the line for that amount of time. And now you might not physically be able to work, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, I know we were talking about the NBA, but if you're in the NFL and you are a running back, I mean, you're probably pretty beat up.
Yeah.
So you might not be able to go to Home Depot and walk on those concrete floors, right? So that's why it's important to focus in on what your plan looks like, because obviously if you're going to be an entertainer, if you're going to be a star athlete, you've got a lot of resources that a lot of us normal folks, I guess we'll call us, not the cream
specimens,
the cream of the crop, we'll call it. We don't have the ability for that. So that's why it's important, because you look at it this way, is like your time span is a lot different as far as your career is concerned. It's a lot shorter. So you got to make sure that you are on point. You're not waiting until 60 to start retirement planning. You're going to do that right on the onset because you got millions of dollars coming your way.
What I would say to most people, whether you're a star athlete or just an average Main Streeter out here, the financial literacy in this world is very lacking. Nobody talks about checking accounts, how to balance it anymore, because most people don't have a checking account. But you need to understand how the investment world works, because it's important to you. It's not about all the alphas and betas and all the equations that you see. It's like, how does it help me? How does it benefit me to understand what a mutual fund is, what a 401k is? Those are things that should be taught. But when was the last time you took a class in that, Chris? Probably not very long ago, if at all.
I couldn't tell you, yeah.
Right. Most people don't. I mean, even in high school, they don't even think about investments. Sure. They don't think about financial planning. In college, unless you are taking finance, you don't even deal with any of that. And that's probably the most important piece of education that you will have, because that will affect you not just today, but for the rest of your life. If you do the wrong things, it's hard to play catch up if you've never. I mean, the number of people that we have to convince to put money into their matching program and their retirement plan at work is unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's where I think most employers, most education programs do a poor job of financial literacy.
I will say that's probably the first bit of advice I got from my mom when I got my first job. She said one day, I was bussing tables, so it didn't apply then, but you're going to have a job that has a 401k, and if they have a match, it's free money. Mm-hmm. Take advantage of that. After that, never touch it. Obviously, as you get older and older, you're going to have to depend on that. So that advice didn't necessarily hold true for, throughout the years, but it is great advice, and it is, unfortunately, more than some people get,
But that was your mother that gave it to you.
That was my mother. You're right. Yep. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't. Yeah. It's been, I don't know. I haven't used the Pythagorean theorem that I learned in high school in quite a while. But, when it comes to balancing checkbooks and things like that, that fiscal solvency, we talked about the A word a little earlier, annuity, and how that is kind of met with some recoil. There's an emotional response to hearing that. What about the B word, budget? When that comes up in the conversation, is that something that people go, I don't know, my money's there, and then it's not? Or like,
it's a deer in headlights look.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. There are some people that do really well at budgeting, but I think the majority of Americans nowadays are pretty bad, right? It's very important to budget that. And, kind of going back to the NBA players, I can assure you that most athletes don't have any type of budget. They see that money coming in, and then they see it coming out, right? But
They see what they get for it,
there's
yeah.
a lot of things that you can do. I mean, you brought up the A word again, but like I think we talked about it before, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, he's deferred his massive contract until he's probably gone from the game.
Yeah.
So, if you can say, hey, let's defer some income, if you've got a massive contract, or even if you're not a star athlete and you've got a windfall, an inheritance, that type of thing, there's a lot of options out there. But nobody's going to come to you and say, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to seek that advice.
And the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, Ralph and Tim Short, as fiduciaries, they will let you know. They will give you that advice, but you do have to go out and seek them to schedule a time, that complimentary conversation, 804-635-3550. Really quick anecdote before we wrap up here. We mentioned Shaq and how he has his name on a lot of things. I was in Atlanta visiting my parents for the holidays, and I don't remember exactly where it is, but there was there's a Papa John's that I drove by, and it's got the phone number, and it was 555 Shaq. I was like, oh really? I know who owns this particular one.
Yeah.
But the man is pretty resourceful, realizing the importance of multiple streams of income, having that financial literacy. There are things that can certainly apply. He probably can't teach you how to shoot a free throw. That's neither here nor there. But to get that financial literacy, to get some perspective on it, especially as you get closer and closer to retirement, the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, they're here for you. You just have to set up a time to speak with them. Go to welcomehomefp.com or give a call, 804-635-3550. And as always, want to thank you for joining us here on Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short of Welcome Home Financial Partners. Hope you have a great week ahead of you. Stay safe out there. Take care of one another. Gentlemen, appreciate the time as always. As we wrap up, going to leave you with the final word.
Well, thank you, Chris, and we appreciate everybody listening as well. But, we talked a lot about the events today and star athletes, and I think I'll keep it to the events right now because I don't know how many star athletes are listening this early in the morning on a Sunday, but, I think it's a really nice place, whether it's the First Friday events that we do or some of the more fun events that we do around the city or around town, around the area. Get to know us, especially if you're a current client listening and now is the time to bring in your beneficiaries. But a good resource is getting onto our website and see what's upcoming. We've got an events tab there. So obviously with the new year, we've got new events coming up for the year. So I challenge everybody to come out to one of our events. We'd like to get to know you. But also, too, is the complimentary process of the retirement roadmap, getting everybody in and seeing kind of where things are, peeling back the onion a little bit. But yeah, once again, we want to thank everybody for listening and take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any resident of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.